technology to be used fully and greatly to enliven your teaching and the people who come. Fulfill this and you are fulfilling the Shakti God gave you, the bequeathment of gifts that are yours as a teacher of God, just as Dr. King used his. To teach is to demonstrate, and Dr. King did exactly that. And where would we be without his message? On April 3rd, Dr. King delivered a speech in Memphis, Tennessee. In the speech he said, like anybody, I would like to live a long life. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I'm happy tonight and fearing no man, for my eyes have seen the glory of the divine, of the Lord. The next day, Martin Luther King was assassinated. On that day, Coretta King, his wife, asked her children how they felt about the man who killed their father. And her son Dexter looked up at her and said, Mama, I think we should forgive him. That's what Daddy would do. To teach is to demonstrate, indeed. On the heels of Dr. King's courageous example, I would like to now turn to the teaching life of Mother Teresa, whose work, like Babaji's and Dr. King's, came from very modest beginnings and flourished into an empire of healing. The story is told that in the early years of her novitiate, she was being observed lighting candles in the chapel by the head priest and the Mother Superior, or whatever she's called. And they looked at one another, the head priest and the Mother Superior, as they watched Mother Teresa, and they kind of winced and thought, what's going to become of this little nun? She seemed so simple in character and so simple in her qualities and in her actions. This 4'11" woman went on to shed a blazing light on poverty's darkness, and she ignited the slums of Calcutta with her fire of faith and great compassion. While riding on a train one day, she heard God's call to start an order of missionary nuns, and its purpose was to serve the poorest of the poor. She would not relent until this call came into being. And by 1979, she was expressing her work in the steamy streets of India, as well as the homeless places of New York City and San Francisco. In that year, the novitiate, who some wondered would amount to much, received the Nobel Peace Prize. And at the time of the presentation of the Nobel Prize, they were lauding her for averting war by serving the hungry and the homeless, and she characteristically changed the subject. She seized the moment to use it as a platform to talk about one of her strongest messages, and that was this: love in the family. Which, interestingly, as I researched the lives of about 6 great teachers of God for this very keynote, was a steady and running theme: love in the family. As she saw it, talking of matters of war and peace was general, out there somewhere and an easy avoidance. She wanted to bring it all home, up close and personal. Can a phrase like the family of man have any resonance at all, she asks, if the family has none? The poverty of spirit, of loneliness and of being unwanted, this is the hunger you and I must find, and it begins in our own home. Extend your love, she pleaded, to the people right around you, and make your home a center of compassion. Lastly, forgive endlessly. This was a message she brought everywhere, including into Washington, D.C., where in 1995 at a prayer conference, Mother Teresa spoke. And she spoke of family love again. She spoke of putting the elderly in homes and then leaving them there. She spoke of abortion and the lack of time we seem to have to love one another. And the Time magazine article that covered this story said that in about 1.3 seconds, there was no one in the room she hadn't offended. And after another 1.3 seconds, people stood like statues in Madame Tussauds. President Clinton and Hillary just had their jaws dropped to their chest. But then after another 1.3 seconds, applause built and swept the room. And applause not so much of agreement, but of awe, because of passionate truth being uncompromisingly spoken. This struck chords of profound respect. The article continues that this teacher of God stimulated some out-of-ordinary text for Time magazine. Mother Teresa, the article continues, had a faith that was not of this world. She was intent on saving souls in an era that stopped believing the soul even exists. Mother Teresa gave and received both spiritually and tangibly. Her work expanded exponentially, just like Babaji's, but she had no business plan or marketing strategy. It was all guided by her attunement in prayer. This was the first thing she did. When asked how she would accrue needed resources for the expansion of her work, she said, "The Lord sends it. We do the work, He provides the means." This nun, who started her work with only the sari on her back and a call in her heart, amassed group assets in excess of over $41 million. Isn't that amazing? Like Babaji and like Dr. King, some of her actions came under fierce attack. A British journalist in a TV broadcast referred to her as Hell's Angel. He questioned her for receiving donations from shady characters. But without apology or regret, she stood by her own code, and she said she had no moral right to refuse donations given for the poor and the homeless. And so she received them, despite the backgrounds of these shady characters. Her code was rooted in her relationship with God, whose codes are not of this world. In 1989, she said, "I always begin in prayer, and my prayer begins in silence. It is in the silence of the heart that God speaks, and we need to listen. It is not what we say, but what the divine says to us and through us that matters. As blood is to the body, prayer is to the soul." And so we see in the lives of these three great teachers consistent soul qualities. Central to their lives was a very personal relationship with their soul and with God, the divine, Lord, whatever you want to call it. From this relationship, all else followed. They fed and sustained this relationship with a practice relevant to their own personal spirituality. Their faith and their courage was engendered by this practice and allowed them to lean into mystery and trust. They listened to their souls and followed even when it seemed irrational to do so. They leaned into the direction of their souls even when it seemed irrational to do so, even when it seemed to take them into harm's way. This is the authentic empowerment Gary Zukov speaks of in the Seat of the Soul. Empowerment arising not from fierce will, but from a spiritual fire that infuses the will. This is called Tuz in the work of Clarissa Estes and Satyagraha and Mahatma Gandhi's. Their example invites us to ask ourselves the question, how much do we use our soul? How much do we use our soul as a compass for direction in our work? Do we take the time to have its visitation? What does our soul need to be nourished and presenced in our life? Might we get so busy with the doing of our doing that we forget the source from which it flows? Next to our marketing plans and business strategies, are we willing to allow mystery? I'm going to speak some contrarian stuff right now. Next to our marketing plans and business strategy, are we willing to allow mystery and the presence of the divine to have their place? Can we lean back and in and find the place where God's love and God's hand supports you in your call and in your work? And from there, have a true letting go and a sense of peace? Can we stand on the precipice of self-employment? I've been there. I am there. Can we stand on the precipice of self-employment and declare, I am not self-employed. I am God-employed. And as such, allow God to be the chairperson of our board. And when the numbers are low and the attendance is slim and the yoga center floods and the teacher down the street sets up a new glitzy yoga salon, can we go to our altars and pray? And like Mother Teresa, can we lean in and just listen for a while and expect to receive? Can we remember that success in our business is less about numbers and much more about living the particular teaching life you are called to? Vital to personal integrity is that you belong to your own life or not, writes John O'Donohue. This means not comparing our call and its outcome to anyone else's. It means being willing to live as our call manifests nobly. The externals make little difference to our soul. Our soul doesn't care about our net worth. All it cares about is that we are living the journey true for us. Like these teachers of God, there will be times of despair and sorrow balanced by times of fulfillment and bliss. All of these times need our dignifying. Ironically, there will be times when the call to teach occurs as the incapacity to teach. Seasons in life when you cannot stand there and do it. Those times are graduate level work, and they invite us to let go of I teach, therefore I am, and instead stand in I grow, therefore I am. Your spouse may be in rehab. Your teenage son may need you more than ever. You may be healing wounds from the past. Whatever the reason, it may be a time for a retreat and even a time of helplessness, as Babaji describes it. But it's not an absence of courage. It's a time for regrouping with the self and honoring the subterranean work of the soul. Experience knows its own way, writes John O'Donohue, and we can afford to trust our souls much more than we realize. These times are times of letting go of our concepts of what it means to be a teacher. It's a time and a season for going back to the soul and realizing that in the non-teaching times, you're doing an inner workshop. From my own life experience, I can tell you there will also be times when the service you are called to seems much bigger than who you are. In those times, we must again rely on our soul and its knowing and our personal relationship with the divine. Those spiritual lifelines are what allow us to be unafraid or be afraid and go forward anyway. On September 11th, I was called to New York City to help with the recovery efforts of a major consulting firm down there. And I was asked to be with 40 of the most traumatized survivors. And I had this was way beyond anything I had ever been trained for or prepared to do. The only thing I could do was go back to my practice. And I thank God for it. I went back to my practice and I prayed. I did my sadhana. I aligned with all of those spiritual teachers that ever meant anything to me. And I thought if they could do it and step forward anyway, I could do it too, trembling on my way. I did so, and as a result, great healing came forward, but not because of anything particularly adept in me, but simply because of my willingness to say yes, have my fear in my heart, and simply show up for what the divine cared to deliver on that day. You would think that after 35 years of teaching and having huge unknowns work out beyond my wildest dreams, that I would trust this divine benevolence that Babaji spoke of on the tape. But I still have fear. In one of his final and last darshans, Babaji spoke of fear with great compassion. He said it is the last thing to go in the lifetime of any great yogi. To be free of it is to become God itself. In the meantime, he says, there are these smaller moments of, like what Shobhan was talking about, of making peace with our life and ourselves as we are, as it is right now, of being in communion with our soul and visiting ourselves in compassion in our practice. At those moments, we heal with our fear, we heal the fear, and we heal the global fear at a certain level. I would like to ask you to now refer to a handout that's on the seats behind you, and it's called The Soul Qualities of a Teacher of God. We don't have the time to read this, but I'd like to ask that we read the first three and the last three together. If we could just do this out loud. So, the soul qualities of a teacher of God. All taught and stood for something that transformed them at the deepest core of their being. All loved God first and used their relationship with God as the source for their service, the wellspring of their confidence. All had an inner life from which they were led, from which faith and courageous soul-directed action emerged. And the last three. All saw the home, the family, as the bedrock of love and peace, both personal and planetary. All were teachers of love first, all else second. All lived the truth. To teach is to demonstrate, and taught the same course, the path of love. On the back of this handout, there are some potent quotes you might like to look at your own leisure. And at the bottom, 7 questions for personal reflection after listening to this keynote. I remain forever a teacher, giving out homework. I would like to end by saying to you that my prayer for you is that you harvest your own inner relationship